Commander Jake Morrison pressed his face against the cold metal of the observation window and watched his home planet die below him. Earth looked like a diseased animal from this height, its surface covered in ugly brown scars where the mining. Machines had torn away mountains and forests. The blue oceans had turned gray from all the dust and chemicals. White clouds no longer drifted across the sky because there was no clean air left to make them. 50 years had passed since the Zephyrian ships first appeared in Earth's sky like giant metal birds of prey. Jake remembered being a young boy when the aliens came down from the stars with their superior weapons and technology. They did not come to destroy humanity completely. They came to use humans like tools. The Zephyrians were tall creatures with gray skin and 4 arms. Their eyes glowed, red in the dark, and they spoke in voices that sounded like metal scraping against stone. They told the leaders of Earth that resistance was pointless. Their empire stretched across 1,000 worlds, and they had enslaved dozens of species before humanity. Earth would join their collection of worker planets whether humans wanted to, or not. Jake touched the scar on his neck where the Zephyrians had implanted a control device when he was 12 years old. Every human on Earth carried one of these devices. It prevented them from attacking their alien masters directly and made sure they followed orders without question. The aliens called it a compliance chip, but humans had a different name for it. They called it a slave collar. Mining Station Delta 7 floated in orbit above what used to be the Amazon rainforest. Jake commanded this station and the 3,000 human workers who lived here. Every day they processed tons of rare minerals that the mining machines pulled from Earth's surface. The Zephyrians needed these materials to build their warships and expand their empire across the galaxy. Lieutenant Amy Carter walked up behind Jake and stood beside him at the window. She was one of the few humans the aliens trusted with limited authority. Her compliance chip had been modified to allow her to give orders to other workers, but she could never disobey a direct command from a Zephyrian overseer. The reports came. "In from the home office," Amy said quietly. Her voice carried the flat tone that all humans developed after years of having their emotions suppressed by the control devices. "They want to see you in the command center." Jake nodded and followed Amy through the narrow corridors of the station. Human living quarters were cramped and uncomfortable because the Zephyrians saw no reason to waste space on creature comforts for their workers. The walls were bare metal and the floors were cold. The air recycling system made a constant humming, noise that never stopped. The command center was larger than the other rooms because it housed the alien technology that controlled the mining operations. Holographic displays showed the status of mining equipment across the planet. Red numbers indicated how much material had been extracted each day. Green bars showed the efficiency ratings of different human work crews. Everything was measured and monitored. Overseer Kelvash waited for Jake in the center of the room. The Zephyrian stood 8 feet tall, and his gray skin had a metallic sheen under the artificial lights. His 4 arms moved independently as he operated multiple control panels at once. When he saw Jake approach, he turned his glowing red eyes toward the human commander. "Worker Morrison," Kelvash said in his grinding voice. "The aliens never used human military ranks because they did not recognize human authority. The High Command has made a decision about the future of this world." Jake felt his compliance chip activate as Kelvash spoke. A warm sensation spread through his brain, and suddenly he could not think about anything except listening to the aliens' words. This was how the control devices worked. They did not force humans to obey through pain or fear. They made obedience feel natural and right. The mineral deposits on Earth are nearly exhausted, Kelvash continued. In 2 standard years, we will have extracted everything of value from this planet. The High Command has decided to relocate the human population to mining worlds in the Outer Rim territories. Amy's face went pale when she heard these words. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach, but the compliance chip prevented him from showing any reaction. The Outer Rim territories were where the Zephyrians sent species they no longer needed. Most of the relocated populations died within a few years from the harsh conditions and inadequate supplies. "What about the excess population?" Amy asked. Her voice remained flat, but Jake could see fear in her eyes. "Excess population will be terminated," Kelvash replied without emotion. "The transport ships can only carry 20 million humans. The remaining 7 billion individuals serve no purpose to the Empire." Jake's compliance chip worked harder to keep him calm as the full meaning of the alien's words hit him. The Zephyrians planned to kill almost every human on Earth. They would save only enough workers to operate the mining equipment on distant worlds. Everyone else would die. "You have 1 year to prepare the selected workers for transport," Kelvash told Jake. "Efficiency reports will determine which humans are chosen for relocation. Begin the selection process immediately." The alien turned away and began working at his control panels again. Jake and Amy stood in silence for several minutes while their compliance chips processed the new orders. Finally, the warm sensation in Jake's brain faded, and he could think clearly again. Amy looked at Jake with desperate eyes. They could not speak freely here because the aliens monitored all conversations in the command center. But Jake understood what she was thinking. They had 1 year to save the human race from extinction. Deep beneath the ruins of New York City, Dr. Paul Bennett worked in a secret laboratory that the Zephyrians had never discovered. The underground tunnels and caverns that housed the surviving human population extended for miles in all directions. The aliens knew about the major settlements, but they had never bothered to map every tunnel and hiding place. Paul had been a quantum physicist before the invasion. Now, he spent his days studying pieces of Zephyrian technology that the Resistance had managed to salvage over the years. The aliens were advanced, but they were not gods. Their machines could be understood and their weaknesses could be found. His daughter Lisa sat beside him at a workbench covered with alien components. She had inherited his intelligence and his determination to fight back against their oppressors. While Paul worked on understanding Zephyrian science, Lisa trained with the underground resistance fighters who carried out small acts of sabotage against alien operations. "I think I found something important," Paul said as he examined a damaged control module from a Zephyrian patrol craft. Their entire command structure depends on quantum entanglement networks. Every ship and every facility connects to a central processing hub that coordinates all their operations. Lisa leaned closer to look at the device. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they have a weakness," Paul replied. "If we can disrupt their quantum networks, we can blind their entire fleet. Ships would lose contact with each other. Ground forces would not receive orders. Their whole empire would fall apart." Paul had been working on this theory for months, but he had never been able to prove it. The Resistance lacked the resources to build the kind of equipment needed to test his ideas. They could steal small pieces of alien technology, but they could not construct major weapons or communication systems. "We need to get this information to the other Resistance cells," Lisa said. "If your theory is correct, then every human settlement needs to know about it." Paul nodded and carefully packaged the control module and his research notes. Lisa would carry them to contacts in other underground cities. The Resistance had developed a network of smugglers and messengers who could move people and supplies across the planet without detection. Jake Morrison returned to his private quarters after his meeting with Overseer Kelvash. The room was small and plain like all human living spaces, but it served his needs. He sat on his narrow bed and stared at the metal wall for a long time while he considered what he had learned. 7 billion humans would die unless something changed. The Zephyrians had made their decision and they had the power to carry it out. No human government existed anymore to negotiate or protest. The aliens had eliminated all forms of human authority, except for the work supervisors they appointed to manage their labor force. Jake opened a hidden panel in his desk and pulled out a small communication device. It looked like a standard work tablet, but the Resistance had modified it years ago to send encrypted messages. Jake had never used it because the risk was too great. If the aliens discovered the device, they would kill him and probably execute hundreds of other humans as punishment. But now Jake had no choice. The compliance chip in his neck prevented him from attacking aliens directly, but it did not stop him from sending messages to other humans. The aliens had programmed their control devices to focus on preventing violence and sabotage. They had not considered that their slaves might organize a coordinated response to genocide. Jake activated the device and began typing a message that would go out to every resistance cell on Earth and in the orbital stations. The message was simple, but it would change everything. The time for hiding and small acts of defiance had ended. Humanity faced extinction, and their only hope was to fight back with every... Captain Roy Hayes crouched behind a pile of twisted metal and watched the Zephyrian supply convoy approach through the asteroid field. 3 heavy transport ships moved slowly between the floating rocks, while 2 escort fighters flew protective, patterns around them. Roy had been planning this attack for weeks, and everything had to work perfectly. His team consisted of 12 humans operating captured alien patrol boats. The Resistance had been stealing small Zephyrian vessels for years, but this would be their first attempt at taking on a major convoy. Roy's compliance chip had been surgically removed 6 months ago during a dangerous procedure that killed 1 out of every 3 humans who attempted it. "Remember the plan?" Roy whispered into his communication headset. "We take the escort fighters. First, then board the center transport. We need prisoners this time, not just supplies." The attack began when Roy's ships emerged from behind the larger asteroids and opened fire on the Zephyrian escorts. Human weapons were primitive compared to alien technology, but the element of surprise gave them an advantage. Both enemy fighters exploded before they could send a distress signal. The transport ships tried to escape, but they were too slow and heavily loaded. Roy's team surrounded them and used magnetic clamps to attach their smaller vessels to the hull of the center transport. Cutting tools carved through the alien metal, and the humans poured into the ship's corridors. Zephyrian crew members fought back with energy weapons, but they were not prepared for the savage intensity of human combat. The aliens had grown used to dealing with compliant slaves who could not attack them directly. These humans moved with deadly purpose and showed no mercy to their former oppressors. Roy found the ship's commander hiding in the control room. The Zephyrian officer was named Veltar, according to the identification markings on his uniform. He stood 8 feet tall, like all his species, but his gray skin had turned pale with fear when he saw the humans break through his door. "You cannot do this," Veltar said in his grinding voice. "We are protected by Imperial law. Humans are not permitted to harm Zephyrian citizens." Roy smiled coldly and pointed his weapon at the alien's head. "Your laws don't apply anymore. We're taking you back to our base for a little conversation." The interrogation of Veltar took place in a hidden facility on the far side of Earth's moon. Dr. Paul Bennett had developed techniques for extracting information from Zephyrian prisoners without killing them. The aliens had different brain structures than humans, but they still felt pain and fear. Commander Jake Morrison arrived at the lunar base to oversee the questioning personally. Word of Roy's successful attack had spread through the resistance network, and everyone wanted to know what intelligence they might gain from their first high-ranking prisoner. Veltar sat strapped to a metal chair in the center of an interrogation room. His 4 arms were secured with electromagnetic restraints that prevented him from using his superior strength. Bright lights shone in his red eyes and made him squint constantly. "Why was Earth chosen for enslavement?" Jake asked the alien. "Your empire includes thousands of worlds. What made our planet special?" Veltar remained silent for several minutes while he considered his response. The Zephyrians were proud creatures who did not like admitting weakness or mistakes. Finally, he spoke in a voice filled with reluctance. "The Galactic Council identified humanity as a potential threat 50 years ago," Veltar said. "Your species showed unusual adaptability and creativity. The decision was made to enslave you before you could develop advanced technology." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "You mean we weren't just unlucky? You specifically targeted us because you were afraid of what we might become." "The Council has observed many species over the millennia," Veltar continued. "Most follow predictable patterns of development. They create tools, build cities, explore their local star systems, then stagnate for centuries before making any real progress. Humans were different." Dr. Paul Bennett stepped forward with his scanning equipment. He had been monitoring Veltar's biological responses during the interrogation to make sure the alien was telling the truth. Zephyrian physiology made it almost impossible for them to lie convincingly when under stress. "What made humans different?" Paul asked. "Your species adapts too quickly to new situations," Veltar replied. "When faced with a problem, most species try the same solutions over and over again. Humans immediately begin experimenting with new approaches. The Council feared that given enough time, humanity would surpass even the oldest civilizations in the galaxy." Meanwhile, on Earth's surface, engineer Helen Brooks made a discovery that would change everything the Resistance thought they knew about the Zephyrian occupation. Helen worked in the deep mining operations that extended miles below the planet's crust. Her job was to maintain the massive excavation machines that carved tunnels through solid rock. The aliens had told humans that they were mining rare metals and crystals needed for their technology. Helen had never questioned this explanation until she noticed something strange about the deepest excavation sites. The machines were not just digging randomly through the Earth. They were following specific paths that led toward the planet's core. Helen used her access codes to examine the mining data that the Zephyrians kept in their central computers. What she found made her blood run cold. The aliens were not primarily interested in surface metals or conventional minerals. They were harvesting something called quantum resonance crystals that formed naturally in Earth's molten core. These crystals were unlike anything found on other worlds. They could store and amplify energy in ways that made them incredibly valuable for weapons development. A single crystal the size of a human fist could power a device capable of destroying an entire star system. Helen realized that Earth had not been enslaved just for its workforce or its location. The planet itself was one of the most dangerous weapons in the galaxy, and the Zephyrians had been secretly harvesting its power for 50 years. They were building an arsenal that could allow them to destroy any civilization that challenged their empire. Back in his underground laboratory, Dr. Paul Bennett made his own breakthrough while studying the quantum control modules that Roy's team had captured. He discovered that the Zephyrian command networks operated on frequencies that human brains could naturally detect and potentially disrupt. This explains why they used compliance chips instead of direct mind control, Paul told his daughter Lisa, as they examined the alien technology. Our neural patterns are naturally immune to their most powerful mental manipulation techniques. They had to use crude mechanical devices because their advanced psychic weapons don't work on humans. Lisa studied the readouts on her father's equipment. What does this mean for the Resistance? It means we have an advantage they never expected, Paul replied. If we can build the right kind of transmission equipment, we might be able to jam their entire communication network. Every Zephyrian ship and base depends on quantum entanglement links to coordinate their operations. Without those links, their empire would collapse into chaos. Paul began working on designs for a quantum disruption device that could be built using salvaged alien components and human engineering techniques. The project would require resources and manufacturing capabilities that the Resistance did not currently possess, but it gave them a clear objective to work toward. Across the galaxy, other human resistance cells received Jake Morrison's call to arms and began preparing for coordinated attacks on Zephyrian facilities. Commander Rick Stone led a group of fighters who had been hiding in the outer colonies for decades. Major Kate Lewis commanded resistance forces in the occupied territories around Mars. Each cell had developed its own tactics and equipment, but now they began sharing information and coordinating their efforts. The underground networks that had once been used to smuggle food and medicine to human settlements now carried weapons, blueprints, and tactical intelligence. Resistance engineers worked around the clock to manufacture explosives and modify captured alien equipment for human use. Zephyrians began to notice increased activity among their human workers, but they did not initially recognize it as organized resistance. The aliens had grown complacent after 50 years of easy domination. They believed their compliance chips and superior technology made rebellion impossible. Colonel Dan Miller proved them wrong when he led an assault on the Zephyrian command post on Mars. His team of 200 humans attacked the facility using tactics that the aliens had never encountered before. Instead of trying to match Zephyrian technology, the humans used primitive but effective weapons like explosives and projectile firearms. The attack succeeded because the aliens were not prepared for such savage and direct combat. Their energy shields could stop their own weapons, but they were less effective against solid projectiles fired at high velocity. The Zephyrian defenders fell back in confusion as humans poured through their defenses like a flood of vengeance. Miller's forces captured the entire facility and executed every alien they found inside. They broadcast images of the victory across the resistance network to show other humans that their oppressors could be defeated. The message was clear to everyone who saw it. The age of Zephyrian supremacy was ending. Dr. Paul Bennett stood before a massive holographic display that showed the internal structure of a Zephyrian quantum processor. For months, he had been studying the alien technology that Roy Hayes and other resistance fighters had captured from enemy facilities. Now he finally understood how their command networks operated and, more importantly, how to destroy them. The key is the resonance frequency, Paul explained to his daughter Lisa and the other scientists gathered in the underground laboratory. Every Zephyrian device operates on the same quantum wavelength. If we can generate a powerful enough signal on that frequency, We can overload their entire network. Dr. Grace Turner, a brilliant physicist who had joined the resistance after her family was killed in a Zephyrian work camp, studied the technical specifications that Paul had developed. "The power requirements are enormous," she said. "We would need to channel the energy output of a small star to generate a signal strong enough to reach across the galaxy. That's where Helen Brooks' discovery becomes crucial," Paul replied. "The quantum resonance crystals that the Zephyrians have been mining from Earth's core can store and amplify energy far beyond anything we previously thought possible. A single crystal could power our disruption device." Lisa examined the mining data that Helen had stolen from the alien databases. "The largest crystal deposits are located directly beneath the main Zephyrian command center in what used to be Europe. Getting access to them would require a major assault on their most heavily defended position." Paul nodded grimly. "That's exactly what we're going to do. But first we need to coordinate with General Adams and the other resistance leaders. This operation will require every human fighter we can gather." General Frank Adams had once been a proud military officer before the Zephyrian invasion. The aliens had broken him during the early years of the occupation, forcing him to watch as his soldiers were executed for trying to resist. He had spent decades as a compliant worker, his spirit crushed by the weight of defeat and loss. But Jake Morrison's call to arms had awakened something in Frank that he thought was dead forever. The old soldier emerged from his despair like a phoenix rising from ashes. He began gathering former military personnel from human settlements across the solar system and welding them into a unified fighting force. Frank's base of operations was hidden deep in the asteroid belt, where Zephyrian patrols rarely ventured. The facility had been carved out of a massive space rock and equipped with manufacturing capabilities that could produce weapons and equipment on an industrial scale. Hundreds of humans worked around the clock to prepare for the coming war. Captain Nina Foster commanded one of the key supply lines that brought captured alien technology to Frank's manufacturing centers. Her team operated a fleet of modified transport ships that could slip past Zephyrian sensors using stealth systems reverse-engineered from enemy scout vessels. Every successful mission brought more resources to fuel the Resistance war machine. Major Luke Barnes led the ground assault teams that captured alien facilities and eliminated enemy personnel. His soldiers were hardened veterans who had learned to fight with a brutality that shocked even their enemies. Years of enslavement had taught them that mercy was a luxury they could not afford. The Zephyrians began to realize the true scope of the human uprising when resistance forces attacked 3 major facilities simultaneously. The coordinated strikes demonstrated a level of organization and tactical sophistication that the aliens had not believed possible from their former slaves. Admiral Korthax reviewed the battle reports with growing concern. The humans were not just randomly lashing out in desperate acts of rebellion. They were conducting a systematic campaign to capture alien technology and eliminate Zephyrian personnel. Their attacks showed clear strategic thinking and long-term planning. "How many facilities have we lost in the past month?" Korthax asked his tactical officer. 17 major installations and 43 smaller outposts," the officer replied. "Human forces have also destroyed or captured over 200 patrol vessels and eliminated nearly 3,000 Imperial personnel." Korthax felt something he had never experienced before in his long military career. For the first time, he was afraid of an enemy that his empire had previously dismissed as harmless. The humans were learning and adapting at a rate that defied all previous models of slave rebellion. Meanwhile, Lisa Bennett prepared for the most dangerous mission of her life. She would infiltrate the Zephyrian Regional Command ship that orbited above Earth's main mining operations. Her objective was to plant her father's quantum virus directly into their central computer systems. Lisa had undergone extensive surgical modifications to appear more like a Zephyrian worker drone. Artificial skin grafts changed her appearance, and implanted devices altered her biological signatures to fool alien scanners. The transformation was painful and risky, but it was the only way to get close to the enemy command structure. The infiltration began when Lisa posed as a maintenance worker assigned to repair damaged systems aboard the command ship. Zephyrian. Security was tight, but they were not expecting a human to have the technical knowledge or the audacity to attempt such a mission. Lisa worked her way through the ship's corridors while avoiding the attention of alien crew members. Her modified appearance and forged identification codes allowed her to access restricted areas where the most sensitive computer systems were located. The quantum virus that her father had created was a masterpiece of reverse-engineered alien programming. It would spread through the Zephyrian command network like a plague, causing cascading failures that would blind and deafen their entire fleet. Ships would lose contact with each other, and ground forces would receive no orders or coordination. Lisa reached the central processing core after hours of careful infiltration. The chamber was vast and filled with crystalline structures that pulsed with energy as they processed information from across the Zephyrian Empire. She carefully inserted her father's virus into the primary data stream and activated the upload sequence. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as the virus spread through the computer network. Lisa ran for the nearest escape pod while Zephyrian security forces rushed to contain the damage. She barely managed to launch herself into space before the aliens could capture her. The effects of the virus were immediate and devastating. Zephyrian ships across multiple star systems suddenly lost navigation and communication capabilities. Fleet formations broke apart as individual vessels drifted without coordination. Ground forces found themselves cut off from their commanders and unable to receive new orders. Commander Jake Morrison watched from his command center as Zephyrian mining operations on Earth ground to a halt. The aliens had become so dependent on their quantum networks that they could barely function without them. Mining equipment shut down, transport ships stopped moving, and security patrols became confused and disorganized. "This is our chance," Jake announced to his assembled staff. "Every human resistance cell needs to attack now while the aliens are blind and helpless. We may never get another opportunity like this." The coordinated assault that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human fighters emerged from hiding places across the solar system and struck at Zephyrian positions with overwhelming force. The aliens tried to respond, but their communication failures made effective defense impossible. On Mars, Colonel Dan Miller led his expanded army in an assault on the planet's main Zephyrian stronghold. The fortress had seemed impregnable when it was connected to the Imperial command network. Now it stood isolated and vulnerable as human forces surrounded it from all sides. The battle for Mars was brief but decisive. Zephyrian defenders fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered by human forces that coordinated their attacks through primitive but effective radio communications. The aliens had grown dependent on their advanced technology and struggled to adapt when it failed them. Miller's victory on Mars sent shockwaves through the Zephyrian Empire. For the first time in their history, humans had captured an entire world from their oppressors. The Red Planet became a symbol of human resistance and a base for future operations against alien targets. General Frank Adams used the chaos caused by the quantum virus to launch his own assault on Xerion Prime, a major Zephyrian mining world in a nearby star system. His fleet of captured and modified alien vessels struck without warning while the planet's defenses were offline. The attack on Xerion Prime was a masterpiece of human tactical thinking. Instead of trying to capture the world intact, Frank's forces systematically destroyed every alien installation and eliminated every Zephyrian colonist they found. They wanted to send a clear message that humanity would show no mercy to their former oppressors. The massacre on Xerion Prime horrified the galactic community. News of the human attack spread through diplomatic channels and caused panic among the alien species that had participated in Earth's enslavement. For the first time, they began to understand that they might have awakened something far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. Dr. Paul Bennett received reports of these victories with grim satisfaction. His quantum virus had worked better than he had dared to hope. Fleet Admiral Bobby Clark stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched another Zephyrian world burn beneath him. The planet Kethmore had once been a thriving alien colony with billions of inhabitants. Now it was nothing but glowing ruins and radioactive ash drifting through space like the remnants of a shattered dream. Bobby had been a simple maintenance worker before the rebellion began. The Zephyrians had assigned him to repair mining equipment in the deep tunnels beneath Earth's surface. He never imagined that one day he would command a fleet of stolen alien warships and hold the power to destroy entire civilizations. The human armada had grown beyond all expectations as more captured vessels joined their ranks. Each alien ship was stripped down and rebuilt according to human specifications that prioritized raw destructive power over the elegant efficiency that the aliens preferred. Human engineers cared nothing for beauty or grace in their weapons. They wanted maximum damage output and the ability to kill their enemies as quickly as possible. "Target the evacuation ships," Bobby ordered his weapons officer. "I don't want any survivors escaping to warn other colonies." Lieutenant Commander Steve Rogers operated the firing controls with steady hands. He had learned his trade during the assault on Mars and refined his skills in a dozen subsequent battles. The human fleet's energy cannons spoke as one, and the fleeing Zephyrian transports exploded in brilliant flashes of light. Bobby felt no remorse as he watched thousands of alien civilians die. The Zephyrians had shown no mercy to human families during their conquest of Earth. Children had been separated from their parents and sent to different work camps. Elderly humans had been left to starve when they became too weak to perform their assigned tasks. The aliens had treated humanity like disposable equipment, and now they would learn what it felt like to be on the receiving end of such callous brutality. On the surface of Kethmore, Commander Susan Wright led her ground forces through the smoking ruins of the planetary capital. Her soldiers moved with the practiced efficiency of veterans who had perfected their art of total warfare through months of continuous combat. They showed no mercy to any alien they encountered and took no prisoners who might slow down their advance. Susan had been a school teacher before the invasion. She had spent her days educating human children and preparing them for productive lives in a free society. The Zephyrians had ended that dream when they herded her students into work camps and forced them to operate dangerous mining equipment. Many of those children had died from accidents and exhaustion during the early years of the occupation. Now Susan channeled her grief and rage into making the aliens pay for every human life they had destroyed. Her soldiers respected her because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. When they eliminated alien defenders, she was there beside them. When they searched buildings for hiding enemies, she led from the front. "Check every structure," Susan ordered her squad leaders through her communication headset. I want confirmation that this world is completely cleansed of alien presence before we move on to the next target. The systematic extermination of entire Zephyrian colonies had become standard procedure for human forces. They did not simply defeat their enemies or capture their territory. They erased every trace of alien civilization and left behind dead worlds that would serve as monuments to human vengeance. Back on Earth, Dr. Paul Bennett put the finishing touches on his greatest creation. The Ragnarok device looked deceptively simple from the outside. It was just a metal cylinder about the size of a human torso with control panels and power connections along its surface. But inside that innocent shell lay the concentrated fury of a dying planet. The device used quantum resonance crystals harvested from Earth's core to generate fields that could destabilize the atomic bonds holding matter together. When activated at full power, it could cause entire fleets of enemy ships to simply cease to exist. The energy released would make nuclear weapons look like children's fireworks in comparison. The first field test is ready, Paul announced to his assembled research team. We'll use one of the smaller asteroids in the belt as our target. Everyone needs to maintain a safe distance of at least 50,000 kilometers. Dr. Grace Turner monitored the test from the command center of their hidden facility. She watched through long-range sensors as Paul's device was transported to the target asteroid by remote-controlled drone. The small space rock was about 2 kilometers in diameter and composed primarily of iron and nickel. Paul activated the device by remote control, and immediately every sensor in the area went wild. The asteroid began to glow with an eerie blue light that grew brighter and brighter until it was painful to look at directly. Then the light suddenly vanished and the asteroid was gone. Not destroyed or shattered, but completely erased from existence as if it had never been there at all. The energy release was exactly what our calculations predicted, Grace reported with excitement in her voice. The field effect propagated at faster-than-light speeds and consumed the entire target in less than 3 seconds. We have created the ultimate weapon. Paul nodded with grim satisfaction. The Ragnarok device represented the culmination of everything. He had learned about Zephyrian technology and quantum physics. It was humanity's answer to 50 years of slavery and oppression. No alien civilization would ever again have the power to threaten Earth. The first combat deployment of the Ragnarok device came during the human assault on the Zephyrian fortress world of Velthara. Admiral Bobby Clark's fleet encountered the largest alien defense force they had faced since the rebellion began. Over 300 Zephyrian warships formed a protective barrier around the planet, while surface-based weapons platforms added their firepower to the defensive screen. "Deploy the Ragnarok device," Bobby ordered without hesitation. "Let's show these aliens what happens when they stand against humanity." The weapon was launched from Bobby's flagship in a specially shielded transport pod. Human ships retreated to minimum safe distance while the device approached the center of the Zephyrian formation. The aliens tried to destroy it with their energy weapons, but the pod's armor was designed to withstand anything short of a direct hit from a stellar fusion bomb. The device activated automatically when it reached the optimal position relative to the enemy fleet. The same blue glow that had consumed the test asteroid now spread through the Zephyrian defensive formation like a plague of destruction. Ship after ship simply vanished as the quantum field disrupted their atomic structure. Within minutes, the entire alien fleet had been erased from existence. The surviving Zephyrians on the planet's surface watched in horror as their protectors disappeared without a trace. They had never seen anything like the human weapon, and they had no idea how to defend against it. Panic spread through their ranks as they realized that their technological superiority meant nothing against an enemy that could make them cease to exist. News of the Velthara massacre spread throughout the galaxy faster than light itself. Alien civilizations that had remained neutral in the human-Zephyrian conflict suddenly found themselves reconsidering their positions. The species that had participated in Earth's enslavement began to panic as they realized they might be next on humanity's list of targets. The Corvan hegemony was the first to attempt negotiation. Their ambassador arrived at the human base on Mars, carrying offers of reparations and promises of future cooperation. Ambassador Keth Val was a tall insectoid creature with compound eyes and chitinous armor that gleamed under artificial lights. The Corvan hegemony wishes to formally apologize for our participation in the occupation of Earth, Kethval announced to Colonel Dan Miller and his staff. We offer to return all human prisoners in our custody and provide compensation for the damages we have caused. Miller studied the alien ambassador with cold eyes. The Corvans had been enthusiastic participants in humanity's enslavement. Their mining ships had stripped entire continents bare while their overseers had worked millions of humans to death in their industrial facilities. Compensation? Miller asked in a voice filled with deadly calm. What compensation could possibly balance the scales for 50 years of genocide and slavery? Kethaval's compound eyes flickered nervously as he sensed the hostility in the room. We are prepared to offer significant technological resources and territorial concessions. The hegemony controls 17 star systems that could be transferred to human authority. Your offers are rejected, Miller replied without emotion. Humanity has only one response to species that participated in our enslavement: complete and total extermination. The Corvan ambassador fled from Mars carrying word that the humans would accept nothing less than the complete destruction of their enemies. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as other alien civilizations discovered that Earth's children were not interested in mercy or forgiveness. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Martinez led the special operations teams that hunted down individual alien leaders who had played key roles in humanity's conquest. His soldiers were experts in infiltration and assassination who could strike anywhere in the galaxy without warning. They had been trained by the best human fighters and equipped with weapons that could kill any known form of alien life. The final assault on the Zephyrian homeworld began when Admiral Bobby Clark's massive fleet emerged from hyperspace and blotted out the stars above Zeftar Prime. 3,000 human warships formed attack formations while their crews prepared to deliver the ultimate act of vengeance against the species that had enslaved Earth for 50 years. Bobby stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the blue-green world that hung before him like a jewel in the darkness. Billions of Zephyrians lived on that planet in cities that had stood for thousands of years. Their civilization was ancient and proud, filled with art and culture that represented millennia of achievement and progress. In a few hours, all of it would be nothing but radioactive ash drifting through space. Begin the bombardment, Bobby ordered his weapons officers. I want every major city reduced to rubble before we deploy the Ragnarok devices. The human fleet opened fire with weapons that had been designed for one purpose: the complete extermination of alien life. Energy beams struck the planet's surface and carved glowing scars across continents. Nuclear missiles followed behind them to spread radiation through the atmosphere and poison the air that the Zephyrians breathed. Planetary defense systems tried to respond, but they were overwhelmed by the sheer scale of the human attack. Thousands of years of military tradition and tactical doctrine meant nothing against enemies who cared only about maximum destruction and the complete annihilation of their targets. On the surface of Zeftar Prime, Emperor Zelnoth watched his capital city burn from the windows of his ancient palace. The ruler who had ordered Earth's enslavement now faced the consequences of that decision as human weapons turned his world into a hellscape of fire and death. Zelnoth was an old Zephyrian even by the standards of his long-lived species. He had ruled the empire for over 3 centuries and conquered dozens of worlds during his reign. Never before had any enemy possessed the power to threaten his homeworld, much less the audacity to attempt its destruction. "How many ships do the humans have?" Zelnoth asked his military advisors. "Our sensors count at least 3,000 vessels," General Morthak replied. "They have been capturing and converting our own ships for months. Much of their fleet consists of former Imperial vessels that have been modified with their primitive but effective weapons." The Emperor felt something he had not experienced in centuries: genuine fear. The humans had turned the Empire's own strength against it, and now they possessed the power to destroy everything the Zephyrians had built over thousands of years of expansion and conquest. Commander Jake Morrison led the ground assault that would capture the Imperial Palace and bring Zelnoth to justice. His soldiers landed in the ruins of the capital city while the orbital bombardment continued around them. They advanced through streets filled with rubble and the bodies of alien civilians who had been caught in the destruction. Jake's forces encountered desperate resistance from Zephyrian guards, who fought with the courage of defenders protecting their most sacred places. But human weapons and tactics proved superior to alien technology that had been designed for controlling slaves rather than fighting determined enemies. The battle for the palace was brief, but intense. Zephyrian defenders used their energy weapons and superior physical strength to hold key positions, while human soldiers responded with explosives and projectile weapons that could penetrate alien armor. The fighting was savage and personal, as both sides understood that this would be the final confrontation between their species. Jake reached the Emperor's throne room after hours of brutal combat. The chamber was vast and filled with artistic treasures that represented the finest achievements of Zephyrian culture. Ancient sculptures and paintings lined the walls, while crystalline formations provided soft lighting that had remained unchanged for millennia. Emperor Zelnoth sat on his throne at the center of the room. The alien ruler appeared calm and dignified, despite the destruction raging around his palace. His red eyes met Jake's gaze without flinching as the human commander approached with his weapon drawn. "You have come to kill me," Zelnoth stated in his grinding voice. "I suppose this is what you call justice." Jake studied the creature that had ordered the deaths of billions of humans. Zelnoth looked frail and ancient, but his presence still radiated the authority of absolute power. This was the being who had decided that humanity deserved enslavement, and who had never shown the slightest remorse for the suffering he had caused. Justice would be keeping you alive so you could watch. "Your entire species die slowly," Jake replied. "But I don't have that kind of time." The execution was broadcast across the galaxy as Jake's weapon fired, and Emperor Zelnoth died in his throne room surrounded by the artistic achievements of his ancient civilization. The message was clear to every alien species that witnessed it. The age of Zephyrian dominance was over, and the age of human supremacy had begun. Dr. Paul Bennett watched the Emperor's death from his laboratory deep beneath Earth's surface. His Ragnarok devices were being deployed across the Zephyrian homeworld to ensure that no trace of their civilization would survive. The quantum weapons would destabilize matter at the atomic level and erase entire continents from existence. Paul felt no satisfaction as he initiated the final phase of humanity's revenge. Too many humans had died during the 50 years of slavery for any victory to bring true peace to his heart. But he took grim comfort in knowing that the Zephyrians would never again have the opportunity to harm another species. The Ragnarok devices, activated simultaneously across Zeftar Prime, and the planet began to tear itself apart. The same blue glow that had consumed enemy fleets now spread across continents and oceans. Mountains collapsed into nothingness, while cities simply vanished as if they had never existed. Within hours, the Zephyrian homeworld was gone. Nothing remained where the planet had been, except empty space and a few scattered asteroids that had once been part of its moon. An entire civilization had been erased from existence as completely as if it had never evolved from the primordial seas of its birth world. The destruction of Zeftar Prime sent shockwaves through every remaining alien civilization in the galaxy. Species that had thought themselves safe from human vengeance suddenly realized that Earth's children possessed weapons that could eliminate entire worlds. Panic spread through diplomatic channels as governments tried to determine if they would be next on humanity's target list. General Frank Adams addressed the galaxy from his command center in the asteroid belt. His message was broadcast on every communication frequency and translated into hundreds of alien languages. The words were simple and direct, leaving no room for misunderstanding or negotiation. "The Zephyrian Empire is dead," Frank announced. "Their homeworld has been destroyed and their fleets have been scattered to the void. Let this be a lesson to every species in the galaxy. Earth is now the center of galactic civilization, and humanity will accept only complete submission from all other life forms." Frank's ultimatum gave the surviving alien civilizations 30 standard days to send representatives to Earth with formal declarations of surrender. Any species that failed to comply would share the fate of the Zephyrians. Any attempt at resistance or rebellion would result in immediate extinction. The response was swift and uniform. Alien ambassadors arrived at Earth carrying messages of surrender and offers of tribute. The Corvan hegemony offered their entire industrial capacity to serve human needs. The Astral Collective promised to provide their advanced medical technology to benefit Earth's population. Dozens of smaller species begged for the chance to serve humanity in whatever capacity their new masters deemed appropriate. Commander Susan Wright established the protocols for managing the new galactic order from her headquarters on Mars. Former alien military officers were processed through re-education camps where they learned to serve human interests. Civilian populations were relocated to worlds where they could work in mining operations or agricultural facilities under human supervision. The conditions in these labor camps were deliberately harsh and designed to break the spirit of resistance among alien populations. Humans had learned from their own experience as slaves, and they applied those lessons to ensure their former oppressors would never again pose a threat to Earth's security. Lieutenant Colonel Tony Martinez continued hunting down the remaining alien leaders who had escaped the initial purges. His assassination teams operated across the galaxy to eliminate anyone who might try to organize resistance against human rule. The message was clear. There would be no safe havens for enemies of humanity. Fleet Admiral Bobby Clark established patrol routes throughout conquered space to ensure that no alien civilization could develop technology or military capabilities that might threaten human dominance. His warships carried Ragnarok devices and standing orders to use them against any world that showed signs of rebellion or independence. Dr. Paul Bennett completed his final project in the depths of his Earth laboratory, the stellar disruption. A ray could destabilize the fusion reactions of entire stars and cause them to go supernova. Any star system that defied human authority could be sterilized completely, leaving nothing but empty space where worlds and civilizations had once existed. The weapon was tested on a remote star in the Outer Rim territories.